The arena air wasn't just heavy, it was stagnant, compressed by the weight of a monologue that had gone on for too long. In the center of the ring stood the usurper, the man who had taken the crown not by merit, but by brute force and manipulation. He held the microphone like a weapon, his voice echoing off the rafters, demanding an acknowledgement that the crowd refused to give. You could feel the restlessness in the stands, a low hum of dissatisfaction that wasn't quite a boo, but something worse in difference. They were waiting for a savior who wasn't on the run sheet. They were waiting for a moment that the dirt sheet said was impossible. The usurper paused, looking into the hard camera with eyes devoid of fear, mocking the very idea that anyone could challenge his reign. He spoke of legacy, of blood, of a hierarchy that began and ended with him. It was a masterclass in arrogance, designed to suck the hope out of the building. The commentary team sat in awkward silence, struggling to sell the dominance of a king the people didn't vote for. Michael Cole's voice was subdued, almost resigned, painting the picture of a dark era with no dawn in sight. But the most dangerous thing in a wrestling arena isn't the noise. It's the quiet right before the storm breaks. As the villain raised his finger to the sky, demanding the show go off the air with his image burned into the screens, the production logo didn't flash. The screen didn't fade to black. Instead, the feed flickered. A static glitch, barely a second long, tore through the Titantron. The usurper lowered his hand, confused. The crowd stopped their murmuring. In that split second of confusion, the oxygen left the room, replaced by a sudden, terrifying realization that the script had just been thrown out the window. It started with a single note. A bass drop so profound it rattled the unbolted chairs in the front row and vibrated through the chest of every fan in the upper deck. Then, the silence returned for a heartbeat. Just long enough for the collective brain of 20,000 people to process what they had just heard. When the realization hit, the noise didn't sound like cheering. It sounded like a jet engine exploding inside a cathedral. It was a guttural, primal roar of recognition that drowned out the commentary headsets before a single word could be spoken. The lights died completely, plunging the arena into an abyss of flashing cell phone lights, creating a galaxy of artificial stars focused on the entrance ramp. The music kicked in that familiar, menacing orchestral swell that signals not just a wrestler, but a deity. Corey Graves was screaming, his voice cracking, shouting unintelligible disbelief that cut through the broadcast mix. It can't be, he's supposed to be gone. He's supposed to be finished. But the denial only fueled the hysteria. On the stage, the smoke cannons erupted, thick plumes of gray obscuring the entrance. The camera operator zoomed in, hunting for the silhouette, shaking with the same adrenaline that was coursing through the audience, and there he stood. Not the polished corporate champion of years past, but a rugged, hardened version of the legend. He didn't pose. He didn't smile. He simply adjusted his wrist tape, looking out at the sea of humanity losing its mind. The commentary team shifted from shock to awe. "The tribal chief has returned," Cole yelled, his voice straining against the decibels. "But this isn't the man who left. This is a man who has walked through hell to get back to his yard." The walk to the ring was a study in controlled intensity. Usually, a return of this magnitude warrants fireworks, pyrotechnics, and theatrics. But tonight, there was none of that. The man walked with a slow, predatory cadence, ignoring the hands reaching out from the barricades. He wasn't here for adulation. He was here for execution. The camera tracked him from a low angle, making him look like a titan descending from Olympus to crush a rebellion. Every step he took seemed to shrink the ring, making the usurper inside it look smaller, more fragile. Pat McAfee was standing on the announce desk, tossing his headset, completely breaking professional decorum. "Look at his eyes, Cole. There is no soul behind those eyes. He is looking at that ring like it's a crime scene." The storytelling was entirely in the body language. The returning king didn't look at the crowd once. His gaze was locked on the man in the ring, a laser focus that communicated more violence than a steel chair ever could. As he climbed the steel steps, the camera caught the details: the gray in the beard, the new scars, the slight change in his gear that suggested a darker, more rogue persona. He paused on the apron, the rope separating the past from the present. The crowd sensed the shift. The euphoria of the return was morphing into the tension of the confrontation. The chanting stopped, replaced by a buzzing anticipation. He wiped his feet on the canvas, a ritualistic gesture of reclaiming his territory. He stepped through the ropes, and the atmosphere shifted from a rock concert to a gladiator pit. The music faded out, leaving only the sound of heavy breathing and the low, terrified murmur of the audience witnessing a collision course. The ring, usually 20 by 20 feet, felt like a phone booth. The two men stood across from each other, separated by 10 feet of canvas and a lifetime of betrayal. The usurper, who had looked so invincible moments ago, now clutched the championship belt a little tighter, his knuckles white. The returning legend didn't speak. He didn't ask for a microphone. He simply stood there, chest heaving rhythmically, letting his presence do the work. This was cinema in its purest form, no dialogue, just two forces of nature existing in the same space. Michael Cole whispered now, selling the gravity of the moment. You could hear a pin drop in this arena. The history, the bad blood. It's all bubbling to the surface right now. The returning star slowly took off his jacket, folding it neatly, never breaking eye contact. It was a casual act performed with terrifying menace. He walked to the center of the ring. Usurper hesitated, then stepped forward to meet him. They stood nose to nose. The camera circled them, a 360-degree shot capturing the contrasting faces, the fear masked by arrogance on one side, and the cold, hollow certainty of violence on the other. The crowd began a dual chant, a sonic war between the loyalists and the rebels. But it was background noise to the mental game being played in the ring. The returning legend tilted his head, a subtle acknowledgement of the belt on the usurper's shoulder. He didn't reach for it. He smirked. It was a smile that said, "Keep it warm for me." Then, without warning, he turned his back. The ultimate disrespect. He turned his back on the champion, exposing himself, daring the usurper to strike. The crowd gasped, waiting for the cheap shot that would ignite the brawl. But the strike never came. The usurper was frozen, paralyzed by the psychological warfare of a man who didn't need to throw a punch to win the fight. The returning legend exited the ring as calmly as he had entered, walking up the ramp without looking back. The show ended not with a brawl, but with a question mark. The screen faded to black with the usurper alone in the ring, holding a title that suddenly felt incredibly heavy, while the returning king stood at the top of the ramp, silhouetted against the lights. This return changed everything because it wasn't about the match. It was about the narrative reset. In the days that followed, the wrestling world didn't talk about the moves. They talked about the aura. Social media didn't clip a finisher. They clipped the silence. Backstage reports would later leak stories of frantic rewrites, of other wrestlers watching from the monitors in stunned silence, realizing their spot on the card had just dropped a tier. The hierarchy hadn't just shifted. It had been demolished. We often think of wrestling returns as moments of instant gratification, the pop, the finisher, the celebration. But the true mastery of this return was its restraint. By doing less, he achieved more. He reminded the world that, while anyone can hold a championship, only a select few can hold an audience in the palm of their hand without saying a word. It was a reminder that in the theater of combat, the greatest weapon isn't a moveset, it's presence. And as the copyright logo appeared in the corner of the screen, we all knew one thing for certain. The era of pretending was over. The king had returned, and he didn't even need his crown to prove it.